So how does a republic that's been around for 500 years, the most powerful state the world has ever seen, just die? That's what we're going to dive into. We're tracking one of the most incredible transformations in all of history, Rome's fall from republic to empire.
To really get this, we have to go back to the 1st century BCE. Now, Rome was a global superpower, no question about it. But its 500-year-old government was, well, it was starting to crack under the immense pressure of its own success.
Think about it. Decades of insane expansion created staggering wealth for a handful of people, but for everybody else, it meant deep social unrest. The Republic's old institutions, they just weren't built to manage a massive global state, and this created a really dangerous power vacuum. And guess what? A new breed of powerful, ambitious generals were more than ready to step in and fill it.
And that is exactly what happened. Between 60 and 31 BCE, a series of strongmen basically hijacked the Republic. And it all started with an informal but incredibly powerful three-man alliance.
So this alliance was a pretty volatile mix of power. You had Pompey, the rock-star general, then there's Crassus, literally the richest man in Rome, and of course Julius Caesar, a brilliant politician with a ton of popular support. Now these guys did not trust each other one bit, but they were united by one thing. The Senate distrusted and feared all of them even more.
And that's the absolute key here. You gotta understand, this wasn't some official government committee, nope. This was a secret, backroom deal. It was basically a conspiracy between three incredibly powerful guys to use their combined muscle to run the show from behind the scenes, and they got whatever they wanted past a completely helpless Senate.
But you know, an alliance of rivals like this, it's always going to be fragile. As Caesar is out there conquering all of Gaul, his fame just explodes back home. And this made Pompey and Crassus wildly jealous. So Crassus, desperate for his own military glory, launches this disastrous invasion of Parthia and gets himself killed. And with him gone, that three-legged stool just collapsed. It was now just Pompey versus Caesar.
This rivalry, well, it builds towards one of the most famous moments in all of history, the decision that would finally tip Rome into open civil war.
With Crassus out of the picture, Pompey actually teams up with his old enemies in the Senate, and together they make their move. They send Caesar an ultimatum: give up your army, come home. But Caesar saw right through this. He knew it was a trap. Returning to Rome alone meant he'd face trial, political ruin, and, let's be honest, probably death.
So he refused. Instead of disbanding his incredibly loyal army, Caesar marches them south, across the Rubicon River. Now this little river was the legal boundary of Italy. By Roman law, bringing an army across it was a huge no-no. It was an act of treason, an unmistakable declaration of war.
And that single act is exactly why we still use that phrase today. To cross the Rubicon means you've made a fateful, irreversible choice. For Caesar, there was just no going back. So what happens next? A civil war, and it was over pretty quick. Caesar crushed Pompey and became the undisputed master of Rome. He was eventually declared dictator for life. But to a lot of senators, he was a king in all but name, a tyrant who had single-handedly destroyed the Republic. So on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, they stabbed him to death, right there on the floor of the Senate, hoping to bring back the old ways.
But their hopes were completely in vain. Caesar's death didn't restore the Republic. It just ignited an even bigger, more chaotic fire. And into this total chaos steps this totally unexpected player, Caesar's surprise heir, his sickly 18-year-old grandnephew and adopted son, a young man named Octavian.
Now, Octavian might have been young, but he was incredibly cunning. He immediately allies himself with two of Caesar's top generals, Mark Antony and Lepidus. But this time, they did things differently. They learned from the past. Their second triumvirate wasn't some secret handshake deal. No, this was made official law by the Senate, giving them absolute dictatorial power to hunt down Caesar's killers.
You could say history repeated itself, but this time with even more bloodshed. After getting their revenge, the new triumvirs, surprise, surprise, turned on each other. Octavian muscles Lepidus aside, and then he faces off against Mark Antony and his powerful ally, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. At the huge naval battle of Actium, Octavian wins. And after more than a decade of brutal civil war, at the end of it all, only one man was left standing.
So, all his rivals are gone. Octavian is now the undisputed ruler of the entire Roman world. But he faced the ultimate challenge. How do you bring lasting peace and stability without ending up assassinated like your adoptive father? His solution was an absolute masterstroke of political theater. He never called himself king or dictator. Instead, he publicly announced that he had restored the republic. It was genius, really. He kept all the old offices, the consuls, the senators, but he quietly gathered all the real military and political power into his own hands. He called himself Princeps, or First Citizen, and a grateful Senate gave him a new honorary name, Augustus, the revered one.
One of his very first and most important moves was to tackle the root cause of all these civil wars, those massive armies that were loyal only to their generals. And look at this. He dramatically cut the number of legions, slashing the military size by more than 2/3. What was left was a smaller, professional army that was loyal to the state, and, of course, ultimately to him.
And then Augustus just starts fixing things, systematically. For the people, he creates a police force, a fire department, and he guarantees a free supply of grain. That's the bread in his famous bread and circuses policy. For the veterans, he gives them land and bonuses to make sure they stay loyal. And then he starts these huge public building projects that completely transformed Rome, bringing order, security, and prosperity.
And really, this quote just perfectly captures the result of his incredible 40-year reign. The Republic was gone for good. It was replaced by the rule of one man. But in its place, Augustus had built a stable, prosperous, and truly magnificent Roman Empire.
Which brings us to the big, thorny question at the end of all this. Augustus ended a century of devastating civil war. He ushered in 200 years of unprecedented peace, the Pax Romana. But he did it by destroying the Republic. So was the peace worth the price? That's a question historians are still debating today.